Awesome. All right, here we go. I'm happy to have everybody here. Okay, we're all set up. Okay, everyone, thank you for being here. If you didn't see Margaret's message earlier in the chat, please make sure you add your full name and your Georgia PDS number in the chat as you can. That's how we'll record the attendance for today. Make that easy peasy. Thanks again for joining us for today's webinar. Today we'll be talking about active recruiting, and this is for the Georgia Thriving Childcare Business Academy. My name is Shannon. I will be your presenter today. I'm part of a national team here from Civitas of childcare business coaches and trainers working with the Thriving Childcare Business Academy to bring Georgia providers like yourself some critical information, resources, and skill building to support business success and sustainability. Today's session will include it will be about an hour, just so you know, and it does include valuable Q&A time. I encourage you to take advantage of that. Feel free to use the chat throughout as needed if you just need to get a question out. If you want me to clarify something, I can go ahead and peek at the chat. You can also add your questions throughout in the Q&A. We can go back to that Q&A at the end. We look forward to engaging in conversation at the end on any remaining questions that you have. So just a little legal disclaimer before we get started. Here at Civitas Strategies have prepared this information, but it's not intended to constitute any legal, tax, or financial advice. We've used reasonable efforts in collecting, preparing, and providing this information, but we don't guarantee its accuracy, completeness, adequacy, or currency, right? Everybody has a different situation out there. The publication and distribution of this information is not intended to create and receipt does not constitute any attorney-client or other advisory relationship. That's just to make sure that you know there's always expert advice available. We keep this information pretty general, so if you have very specific questions according to your business, you should always seek some helpful, professional expert advice. All right, so let's get started. Here's our focus for the session. We're going to dig into a couple of things. These topics are pretty near and dear to my heart. I coach on these things a lot, so I'm really excited to answer any of your questions and lead you through this information. We'll look at the difference between a job description and a job announcement. We want to also think very specifically about how to create an effective job announcement, and that's a very particular formula that I want to pass on to you. And then we want to focus your recruitment efforts to best connect with top talent. So we'll spend a little bit of time thinking outside the box on how to spread the word about your opening and your job announcements so that you can start getting that top talent applying. Before we dive in, just a note here to say that this information is adapted from the book Lean Recruitment: Finding Better Talent Faster. If you want to dive in more on the topic, you can pick up that book. It's available very cheaply on Amazon. That's by Gary Romano. He's Civitas Strategy CEO. So that you know that we have a certain amount of expertise in this area. Over the last 18 months or so, our team has been tailoring these recruitment best practices specifically for ECE and childcare. So we're really proud of that, and we look forward to giving you kind of all the things we've learned over the course of this work. So as by way of introduction, obviously quality staff is really critical to your business success, not just because it affects the stability and consistency of a child and family in your care, what they experience, but also because from a business perspective, right, turnover costs you very dearly. The thing is that we're also experiencing challenges more broadly in the workforce environment. So it can be difficult to get the right candidates. It can be hard to get the word out beyond the competition and, get a leg up above the competition. Attracting qualified superstar employees to you instead of someone else is also challenging. But there are some key activities and tools that can help manage the uncertainty and the difficulties that exist. And Sunita, I see your question in the chat. I'm happy to post that at the end, or maybe Margaret, you can pull the Lean Recruitment Amazon link when you have a chance. Thank you, but totally understand if it waits till the end, we'll make sure to get that. It's a great resource. So let's start with one of those key concepts that I mentioned now. We'll discuss how to create a 3-part job announcement that will help you better connect with qualified candidates. So this pre-work is a really important step in hiring, but it's not intuitive. So I want to start here and call it out. We want you to take some time before you jump into the process to develop and articulate a value statement about what is special about your business, what makes you unique. It could be your background, your learning philosophy, your culture, your approach to working with families and keeping them engaged, a particular program that you offer or community that you support with those services. Really ask yourself, what is special about your program? When you ask yourself that, often those very first things that come to mind will be the start of your answer, even if you've never thought about this exercise before. You know your business best, and we want you to spend some time really intentionally crafting what that sounds like to someone else. It's kind of the way of getting out this important thought, this important articulation out from you as the passionate owner and into the world. And that's going to help you in recruitment, and I'll tell you how. Now, the distinction between a job description and a job announcement is really central to this kind of shift success. It's critical, but it's very subtle, and so we'll spend some time talking about it. When an organization gets ready to hire, they often start by pulling together a job description. We're all really used to that term, right? A job description is a wonderfully helpful tool for human resources and management. They help clarify roles and responsibility and outline any other parameters that are important for the role. Job descriptions serve that purpose very well. But if you think about it, that main purpose is not to recruit. It's not to recruit talent. Now let's look at what that recruitment piece might look like. So we advise making a shift to creating a job announcement for your recruiting. And this document clearly describes what skills and capabilities are needed. And on top of that, it gives the audience, which in this case is your prospective candidates, a clear, enthusiastic, interest-inspiring peek at the organization and the opportunities ahead for the role that they might want. Again, it's different than a traditional job description. That usually has some background or context, a standard explanation. It's pretty dry. And then it launches into a laundry list of every single characteristic that the business might want to hire. And if you think about it, those pieces aren't really written to persuade and attract an outside audience. So the job announcement acts more like a marketing piece. Its purpose is to inspire the right candidate about the opportunity to work with you. And think about what I just said. That's very different than that job description that we looked at. So we want that job announcement to inspire the right candidate about the opportunity to work with you. So to help you transition to a job announcement, we've broken it down into 3 parts. Each part serves as a purpose and what it's communicating to that ideal candidate that you want to bring on board, with the overall goal of essentially selling the position to them. We want to make the job and your business, the organization, as appealing as possible. You'll see that the process of doing the 3-part job announcement also requires employers to whittle down the details and the requirements to be we want you to be as judicious as possible in what you're looking for. And that can be really difficult. It takes a lot of practice. This requires a good amount of clarity about the most essential expectations of the job and what kind of person you'll need to fill it. Clear, short, simple are the name of the game here. It's also a good time to reflect and decide what you'd like to see from and know about an applicant in order to see if they're a good fit. This might include their work history. It might even include a sample lesson plan or references, depending on what you like to see. So as we kind of go forward, we're going to look through each part. Number 1, the why. Number 2, the what. And number 3, the how. And we'll cover kind of each of those things I talked about. So let's dig in deep on part 1. Part one is the why. This is where you go back to that value statement that you drafted for your business. A good way to think about the position is the hook. And that's kind of a marketing term, right? The hook. Remember that the best talent out there are probably not looking to leave their current position if their current employer is effective at retaining their top talent. So as you're as you're thinking about these sentences in your job announcement, it's really that kind of first paragraph at the very beginning, right? You want to capture that audience. Think about the reasons that your business is more attractive, more special, more innovative, or more unique than others. Maybe it's what's special about who you serve or the community that you're a part of. Maybe it's some growth that you're experiencing or really exciting changes or exciting things coming up for you, or other exciting opportunities that are motivating or inspiring for a candidate. And then part two is the what. Now, in the job announcement, this what looks like this. Recruiting the traditional way means that you have a long list of requirements. You want to get a bunch of candidates that you narrow down through reviewing and screening those resumes, interviewing those candidates, and potentially you might be left with candidates that don't quite fit exactly what you're looking for because everybody was trying to conform to this really long list. So for this part of the process, we really want you to think about it as front loading those decisions. So being very specific up front allows you, to think about what's most essential. It saves you some work later and allows top candidates to really see themselves in what you've drafted. And I'm going to say this again, what it may mean is that you don't get a whole bunch of resumes. At the end of the day, we don't want as many people to apply as possible. We want the right people to apply. So this helps us get to that. So ask yourself here, what are the one or two key things this person will need to succeed in the short term and the long term? What can they potentially learn or train on once they're in the role, right? They don't need to come in with this, this, and this. We can help them get up to speed on that. Is there a certain audience or client that you really need this person to understand? Like if you're hiring a certain age, if your program is STEM focused or STEAM focused, for instance, or are they more general skills? Has the market for talent changed since you last hired? And should you be more specific in a certain way given the changes that are going on? Is there a new training program or a certification adding to the pool of qualified candidates in your area? At the end, you'll look back on your list and then you'll say, what top 3 to 5 things are absolutely non-negotiable? Then you add kind of priorities around education, experience, availability, training. Pay attention to anything that reads as really vague. That can be very easy because sometimes we feel like we are being clear, but to the outside, world, it's not clear. And add any metrics or details you want to clarify, like 2 years of this experience. Like try to be as specific as you can so that someone is able to say, oh, that's me. All right. So number 3 is the how. And this section of your job announcement is mostly logistical. The information here sets expectations on both sides, and so it avoids any surprises later. This outlines all the information you want to see from a candidate as part of their application and how they'll pull it together and submit it to you. If you're very thoughtful and proactive here about what information you'd like to see, it will really help you down the line when you're making those decisions about who to interview or even who to hire. We also recommend here that you be as clear as possible about the position too. Like, what is the schedule? What is the compensation? Are there any benefits or special perks or anything that you offer? Beyond being the best and equitable practice nowadays, I think you'll find that this will save you time when someone drops out of the process because, for example, that they need health insurance and you guys don't offer it. So you want to be as clear as possible so that everybody knows what they're getting into. So if you have questions on that job announcement and what that looks like, and I'm going to come back to some tips at the end of the session, but if you have questions on some things that I said, go ahead and put those in the Q&A and we can come back to them at the end. So now that you put together your announcement, you'll want to make sure it gets in front of top talent. So the next part we're going to concentrate on is really that active recruiting that we're talking about. Now, there are two approaches on how you go about connecting with top talent. There's passive and active searching. People are most familiar with this passive search, posting the description on a job board, local or national, hoping it gets seen by potential candidates who are a good fit. In this scenario, we're relying on the idea that there are not only candidates out there that are searching, right, that they're searching for you, but they'll also happen to come across your posting and choose it over another. So think about how many potential barriers or places where they can turn a corner and do something else instead. Now, there are some benefits to this type of searching, right? It's really like kind of the way we always think about recruiting. Your announcement could certainly be picked up and highlighted by a different job board. Like, let's say you posted it on a, like a Georgia statewide ECE board, and it was picked up by a search engine or something like that. And that will give you some availability that you might not have had otherwise. But let's talk about a different focus. I want to spend some time talking about this active search idea. Remember that in this market, it's safe to assume that the best candidates probably aren't out looking, especially if their current employer is doing a good job at retention, right? So think about that. You, like in that first kind of way of recruiting, we were hoping that somebody would find us. And now what we're saying is like, especially if somebody is doing a good job at retention, those perfect candidates are not out there looking. So we have to get our stuff in front of them. So this is a complementary approach that focuses on active talent search. And as I mentioned, this does take a little bit of time and effort, right? We're investing some time and effort up front, both in the planning of setting it up and the execution, but it's really essential to making sure that you're reaching them where they are. So using this approach, you can focus on reaching connectors, and we'll talk about that. Those connectors help us access networks and candidate pools beyond what you have access to alone. And doing so expands your reach, and that's much more effective overall. So as I mentioned, I kind of mentioned these two that we're going to talk about. And these are two types of audience that will help you kind of execute this type of search. You can reaching out to these two different types of audience will help you do this type of search. First, there are candidates. Those are the ones, of course, that are applying for the job. And as I mentioned earlier, we don't want to recruit as many people as possible, but we want to reach the absolute right ones. So it's, the measure of our success in recruiting in this way is not going to be like 50 or 100 candidates. It's going to be those, 5, 7, 9 that really meet our requirements and that we want to learn more about. So connectors, on the other hand, provide an additional potential candidates via their networks and the candidates that they might know. So start with the first level of connectors that you have access to every day: your friends, peers, mentors, current employees, or the families that you serve. All you need to do is ask them to share your job announcement, and that's it. It's actually a really easy thing that people love to help you with. If you like, you can even considering offering an incentive if you end up hiring someone that they've referred. And that tactic is especially great for current employees and families. Those two populations, current employees and families, love to help you out in this way, right? Hey, everybody, just wanted to let you know we're hiring. Here's the job announcement. I'd love it if you could share it with anybody in your network that might be a good fit, or share it with other networks that you have access to. It's a really easy ask, and they want to be a part of your success. However, there are connectors that you may not know that you might want to reach out to, and we'll talk about those as we continue. Let me just pause here and see if we had any Q&A. Okay, so just a reminder, add your questions into the chat if you have them. We can come back to them in a little bit. It looks like we'll have some extra Q&A time, so I want to make sure we utilize that time. And if you haven't gotten the memo, please add your full name and your Georgia PDS number in the chat. Thank you so much for that. And thanks, Margaret, for adding the Lean recruitment link in there. All right, so we're talking about connectors. So as you embark on an active candidate search, so you want to start by getting to know your ideal employee. Put yourself in their shoes. Where are they? How can you best connect with them? What is your ideal employee doing right now? Like, what stage of life are they in? Are they a retiree? Are they a college student? Where do they hang out? Like, you know, if they're at the community center or the college campus dining facility, at a local hangout or a local church, is that where you should kind of post a QR code to your announcement, right? What social media are they using? Are they in a special group, maybe based on their interests? In this way, you can like think like a marketer, really, like trying to reach someone who might be interested in purchasing your product. Get really creative. Ask friends or family members that are in a similar stage of life as the person you're looking for. What do you like to do? Where are you all the time? Like, where do you grocery shop? Where, you know, like get to know them. And then, of course, you want to connect with them as best as you can. Try to reach those candidates in the places where try to reach those places where you can access your ideal candidate. Start with your network, as we mentioned, right? Don't discount it. I want to make sure we emphasize that. Use your own outlets, your webpage, your social media, your own networks, both professional and personal, and those will go a really long way. So this is the part where I say definitely, absolutely think outside the box on this. Utilize your staff and parents first, as I mentioned, ask directly for referrals, invite them to share. You'll be very surprised how many people will take you up on that. Also, of course, network with your peer businesses. They may be looking for someone who doesn't fit on your team and vice versa. So that's not competition, right? That's just kind of comparing notes. You know, especially if like you're kind of looking for different things that can help you widen your pool. I'd also encourage Facebook groups, right? That's a great place to share and search. Do a little research on childcare facilities, family or education groups, reach out to them personally. All you have to do is kind of find the administrator of that group, reach out to them, ask for help, say you're really looking for this perfect candidate, etc. And they can help a lot as well. So you have quite a few ECE resources at your disposal, and I'd encourage you to utilize those things that you know of in your area or statewide, right? You want to make sure you kind of check out your local resources like early education programs, community colleges, etc. Reach out directly to childcare professionals who they may have someone in mind that could be a good fit for your position as well. Find a social media group and connect with the administrator, mention that. Contact the HR director of the local school or workplace. Identify the president of the Teachers Association, for example, or a homeschool co-op program. These are all your connectors. And again, you want to access their network, but you're also looking for those potential networks that they have that are beyond your reach. And I can't say this enough. I've done it before. I do this type of recruiting for our clients. So all you need to do is ask them to post or share your job announcement. Ask if they know anyone who would be a good fit or who could potentially share it with others. Doing so will multiply how many potential applicants that you're reaching. Be prepared that you may have to pay sometimes for posting on certain job board sites. So plan accordingly, right? When I mentioned about paying, I would say like know as many, decide ahead of time where you want to spend those dollars. Resources are limited. So kind of, there's always going to be free things, especially the more you think outside the box, the more free options you're going to have. And then you can say, okay, these two places are where we could have a lot of success and it's worth my $50 or $100 in that case. And then, of course, you can kind of measure that success, right? Like if you don't get any qualified candidates, you know that that's not a worthy investment next time. Okay, So we talked about that job announcement. We talked about those 3 key parts. And then we kind of turned towards like, now we have this excellent job announcement and we want to get the word out about it. I want to take any of your questions. I'm happy to kind of revisit anything. You can press me on anything, say, how does this work? We can talk about it, but I'll open it now for questions. If you haven't done so, please make sure your full name and your Georgia PDS number is in the chat for me. But I'd also love to hear in the chat some chatty things. So no questions in Q&A either. I'd love to hear from you guys. I'd love to go back. Maybe I can go back to something I started on. When I talked about creating the 3-part job announcement, I started here. Do you remember? I asked you guys to start with some pre-work. I'd love to kind of go back now because you can kind of see as we've kind of thought about how how do you attract a candidate? How do you get them to want to apply? And then how you kind of get others to be as invested as possible in this process. And you can kind of like see why this is a great place to start. This kind of becomes your touchstone, right? In addition to it also be helpful in recruiting, you'll also find that it's a really helpful marketing tool. It's something you can kind of go back to again and again. It also can be helpful as you kind of think about your own business planning or strategic planning, if that's how you want to think about it. If you have a plan for your business for growth, for example, it can be helpful as you kind of like, this is really important to me. This is my touchstone, my guidepost moving forward. So just wanted to go back to this so you could kind of remember why this is so important. And I was going to, yes, and don't forget, I was just about to say, like, this is something you should save, kind of come back to it because we know it's an investment in time. So don't forget that the recording of the session will be available to watch again later on the Georgia PDS system. And then I believe there's also a copy of the slides offered as well. I'm so glad you asked this question, Simone. I would love to talk about this. I think we actually have another session coming up on compensation, and we include bonuses in that too. But you asked a great question. So Simone, if you can see in the Q&A, they asked about if you think sign-on bonuses are a good idea. Now, here's what I have to say about bonuses. Bonuses are a great tool to help you meet some of the workforce challenges that you're facing. If you are lucky via stimulus funding or specific revenue generation that you in your business have a pool of funds that you can utilize for bonuses or temporary pay increases, however you structure it. And it may be like some people may say my problem is retention. And so I would advocate taking that pool of funds and using that to meet your retention challenges, right? Whatever is causing you stress. So if your problem is, I have trouble, the people that I hire, I have trouble getting people on board, or I have trouble the people I hire that they stay for the first 6 months, you can kind of think about that sign-on bonuses and structure it however that you might need. So for example, like a sign-on bonus, I wouldn't say you get it right when you sign on, right? I would say we offer a one-time sign-on bonus that's available half the first 3 months and half after the next 3 months. So you receive it over the period of 6 months. Something like that, I think, is a really smart way to structure a sign-on bonus if that is what you need in order to like kind of overcome any recruitment barriers that you have. So I would definitely like think about sign-on bonuses. They're a great tool for you. If that sign on is the spot where you're like feeling that a little stuck or feeling like you can't, like that's where your workforce is kind of like, that's where you have the challenge. So think about that first and then say, how can bonuses be a tool to help me solve that? It's a great question. Thank you. All right. Okay. Oh, yes, I have a thought on this too. Now, Marissa asks, in my opinion, I've hired teachers due to the experience and how well the interview goes, but then they show me otherwise in their first 90 days. Any tips on how to keep the morale positive? I think there's a whole bunch of stuff in your questions, Marissa, and we kind of have like little topics that kind of overlap with what you're asking. My first thought is, of course, like, how can you really be using that interview time to get a better sense of like some of those really difficult things that are hard to tell, like, if it's timeliness, if it's attitude, if it's like overcoming challenges, if it's adaptation, like whatever it is that you feel like is inhibiting those new employees, like how can you, like an interview question, like, tell me about a time that you were kind of surprised by something and you had to adjust to it on the fly. Something like that, like ask a question that helps you better gauge where those employees or those candidates are in that process. The other thing I would really encourage you to think about is that like onboarding process. And I believe coming up, we have an onboarding webinar scheduled as well. You can also join the small study group that's being scheduled on staff recruitment and retention. I'll talk more about that as we kind of close out. I'm leading that group. I would love to talk about this. Onboarding is really key. And I'm not saying, Marissa, that you're doing anything wrong, but it's really a sense of like how flexible and iterative can you be as the business owner to kind of help meet those folks where they're at, right? Is it something that they're not understanding this or not understanding how we do things? Can they have a buddy system that helps them kind of like make those peer-to-peer connections? Do people have a sense of belonging that they're not, or is it standards that are lacking? Those kinds of things. Like that onboarding can be done 1 trillion different ways. And just like I mentioned about bonuses, we really want that process to work for you as the business owner and work for the employees that you want to like be there for the long haul, as you mentioned. So that would be my initial thoughts. We'll have an onboarding guide in the Georgia resources as well. I would love for you to join my small study group where we're going to be talking about this, because we'll also do a lot of peer-to-peer sharing. So my guess is there'll be someone in the group who can say, oh, I do really great at onboarding, but my problem is interviewing. And we can kind of troubleshoot those and also rely on each other in terms of what works. Awesome. Good. I'd love to see you. Okay. Awesome. All right, Melissa, you also have a question. I see there are also some in the chat too. I'll come back to that, I promise. Okay. Ooh, yes. Yes, we have templates and examples, Melissa. There is, I don't know. Oh, thanks, Margaret, for posting the small study group as well. Awesome. I see you are hot in the chat, Margaret. Thank you. Margaret, I don't know, and you might not know this either, but do we have the recruiting piece or the 3-part job announcement piece ready for the library, for the Georgia library? Or is it already posted? Or let's go ahead, maybe we can post the resource library in the chat so folks can take a look. But yes, we have an accompanying guide that covers everything I talked about here today. It'll kind of walk you through those 3 parts. And it does, I don't know if it goes so far, like, because if you think about it, like so much of that is specific to like what you're looking for. But we do our best to kind of start a template for you there, or like add your value statement here, like then think about the 3 things you want to find here and then whittle it down again. Thank you, Margaret. You're amazing. So the other thing I would encourage you to do, and I thank you for reminding me of this, Melissa, because I wanted to say it, is go look at other people, like spend an hour or 2 hours Googling and finding things that you like, find language, find, it doesn't even have to be for the ECE sector. Find how somebody put something, or like how they describe something, and then kind of tailor it to like what we advise and what works for you. I find that when I'm doing job announcements to be really helpful. But at the end of the day, we want that to be really descriptive for you, and really kind of speak to the needs that you have. I'm trying to think. I'm trying to think if there's something like there's a client that has, I don't know, it's like there's active job posts that I could point you to. But again, like Margaret posted the guide on the 3-part job announcement. There's also the Spanish version that's in the chat for you. It is less of an example and more of a template in terms of like how to build it. And I encourage you to do that kind of like step-by-step legwork, because then once you do it, it's going to feel really intuitive and you're going to be able to kind of see how that works for you moving forward. And then you have it for yourself. But yes, don't be afraid to look at examples. The other thing I didn't mention that I often mention when I talk about this topic is to, once you put something together, make sure that you have other people read it. Go to somebody you trust. It could be a partner, it could be a sister, it could be a friend, a fellow teacher, a fellow director, and say, how does this sound? And they will be really helpful in telling you, like, this is not clear, or this contradicts itself, or I don't understand what you mean here, or this sounds really great, emphasize that. That's a really helpful tip for you too. So definitely do both of those things. Don't be shy. Yeah, great question, Melissa. All right, so then I saw there was one in, I saw Cami asked in the chat, we had a staff member once to be excessively tardy or simply out frequently. And after I let her go, she went to a larger center where the director drilled her and cautioned her about her work attendance. And 5 years later, she's an excellent staff member. Now the assistant director of the larger center. I still hate that things didn't work out well for her at my center. Yeah, that's a really interesting story. And it just goes to show too, that not everybody has a place, right? Like, or it's the right time for that particular person to be at the right place to have success. And that's often not about you. Like, yes, would you have been wanted to be the person and the manager who could help that person thrive? But at the end of the day, that might just not have been a good fit, either person to person or like in that role, or for the right time for that candidate. They weren't ready to grow, right? What do they say? Like, there's kind of an adage about, as a manager, you always want to kind of help people develop to the next step for them, right? And I think that's something to keep in mind too. Like, I know that as employers, we would love to get to places where we don't have any turnover at all. And that's just not going to be possible. So, I think like the more that we can invest in some of these recruitment practices, the better off we are in the long term, because at the end of the day, we're always going to have to be doing it. That's just the nature of having staff, having teams, having people that grow, having a business model, a sector-wide business model where we aren't able to have like the highest compensation or the best benefits, right? So we have to make do and lean on some of those other practices, to shine here or to excel here and to get a leg up on competition here. Cami, thanks for sharing that story. I'm sure it sounds familiar to other folks. Okay. Any other questions? I love these. Thank you for participating. Clearly you can see that I love to talk about it. So I appreciate you guys opening up with some of your questions and thoughts. And again, thank you, Margaret, in the chat for adding those documents so you have those handy. The other thing that Margaret added is that link to sign up for those small group studies, small study groups, I'm sorry. And I'm really excited about that. That will give us a chance to kind of meet ongoing for, over the course of some sessions over a few weeks and really do some hands-on group learning. So I'm really excited about that opportunity. All right, so just to get this out of the way, very happy to come back to questions in the Q&A or the chat. But I will take this chance to just thank you so much for being with us, for being on the webinar. Thanks to Sol too for her interpretation services. I just want to remind you, you have a lot here, and don't underestimate the kind of tools. Again, as I said to Melissa, like once you invest in that time and energy into kind of getting it going, it does front load the work for you. So it's not that you're adding the work, it's just that you're shifting some of that work and some of that choosiness to the front end to make some of the downstream recruiting and hiring later more effective. So creating that effective 3-part job announcement, again, it's just 3 parts. Walk yourself through it, do that work to put that language down, and then kind of refine based on feedback and kind of keep going. You want to understand the use of different recruiting approaches. We talked about active and passive, both are important. The active takes a little bit more time, but it's also where you will see a lot of those results. So yeah, connect. Think outside the box. Think about those networks that you can tap into. Think about how to identify and connect with those connectors to help you really actively recruit those people, and even if they decide that your job isn't for them, you've gotten the word out, you're reaching them, and that's the end goal, right? Okay, so just again, some of these resources that you've heard me talk about. Those free business resources, those are at the Decal Thriving Child Care Business Academy website. That's at decal.ga.gov/thriving. You'll find all of the library as they get posted, those self-study guides, all of the kind of tools and resources that we referenced will be kind of being up there. Those are very topical and helpful and actionable to your business. Also feel free, we welcome you to learn about and register for our upcoming webinars. We'll be doing 2 a month through August 2024. We want those to be very helpful for you, places where you can get some real-time information, be connected with things that are important to you, and find out about new resources. I also mentioned those small study groups. These are new, they'll be starting in November. These study groups, again, as the name suggests, are small groups. They're capped at 10 participants. They're a great opportunity for you to take a deeper dive into the topics that are relevant to running a childcare business right now. The small size of these groups allows me as the coach or whoever your presenter is from our team to get more personalized with helping you on the issues that are affecting your business that are kind of coming up for you as the owner or director. You also will get 4 state-approved training hours and a $300 stipend for each small study group track that you successfully complete. So those, again, are incentivized through Georgia Decal. And so we want those participations. We know they'll be kind of immediately helpful for you in the business. So we wanted to, those are incentivized as well. So all of that and more you can find at decal.ga.gov/thriving. We'd love to see you again on another webinar. Let me just check the, okay. Thank you, Julia. Thank you, Margaret, and thanks, Julia, for asking that. Awesome. And thanks for y'all's feedback. Okay, yes, thank you, Margaret. Another reminder before you log off, if you have not, please enter your name and your Georgia PDS number here in the chat so we can accurately record your attendance. Margaret is working hard on getting those certificates out within 1 week of the webinar, so you should have those. All right, looks like we're all clear on questions and chats. I'm happy to stay on, happy to answer anything that remains. Just a plug again for that resource webpage. Definitely check out those study guides. Those are your reference material for moving forward with all this information. Join us for a future webinar. I would love to see you. And then learn more about those small study groups. We think those will be a really great resource for Georgia childcare business owners. We look forward to seeing you there. Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Thank you, everyone.